Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday Night Live show. This evening, we have Eric P. Godding. He is a partner at Keller and Heckman, and he's here to talk to us about the amicus brief that was just filed with the Chevron suit. And of course, we have Charles Gardner with us. We always love to see him. So thank you so much for joining us. Both of you guys last minute, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Thank you. Let me give you guys. Where's my clapper? I always forget where that is. There it is. Yes. Sorry everyone for Greg. We had Greg scheduled for tonight, and I made a boo boo. I texted him after midnight, and he assumed when I wrote tomorrow, I meant Thursday. So we will try to get Greg back on maybe next week or the week after, but we will get him back on. So sorry about that, everybody. That was I think Greg was going to be on, but he'll be back.
Yes. We only have Eric for a short amount of time because he has vape tongue, so he cannot stay with us for long. Unfortunately, the dreaded vape tongue has gotten him. So we'll try to move this along quickly for you, Eric. We hate to hear that. So how was everybody's week, John? I'm going to start with you.
It's been great. I can't wait tomorrow. I am heading to the beach for a couple of days, so I will be just laying there drinking Coronas and yelling at my grandchildren not to go too far into the water. That's about it.
Nice.
No sharks in Santa Cruz, so I should be.
Can't tell them to stay off the grass this time. I don't know. I've had an interesting week. I guess I'm turned into the resident HOA Chad. I finally had to break down and call Johnny the 5-0 on the delinquent loitering miscreant kids down at the pool. But something pains me so I had to do it, and I have to face. I never thought I'd get to the day where I actually had to post no smoking, no vaping signs in a building. Like the Vapor had to put the no vaping signs in the swimming pool. So I don't know. I'm still rattling with that one in my head. But you know what? Because I'm on the board and when no one's looking, I vape at the pool.
Yeah.
So you all know.
You got privileges, Tim.
Other than that, good week. It was a really good week.
Good. How about you, Eric? Nice to see you. How was your week?
It's been good. We're my wife and I are getting ready to send our first kid off to college. So it's kind of a bittersweet, sweet time.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, wow.
That's hard. I got 1 year left.
Working hard on other vaping issues so that I can go on vacation in 2 weeks.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how about you, Charles?
When will you be an empty nester, Eric?
2 more years. I have 1 more kid, so 2 kids. So we'll be empty nesters in 2 years. So kind of looking forward to it, but kind of a little nervous about it.
Yeah. I'm there. I'm 2 years ahead of you.
All right. You look well rested.
How was your week, Charles?
My week's been great. Some interesting things I can't tell you about.
He always does that to us.
Right. Which are potentially really cool and involve some very prominent people in the field. So just leave that out there, just like dangling. But I think my main crisis this week is my daily battle with the aphids on my chili pepper plants.
Oh, I understand that struggle. My azaleas are beat up every year from the lace bugs.
I mean, I've been blasting them with all kinds of different organic pesticides, and I can see them. And I have jeweler's glasses. Don't ask me why I have those, but I'm looking at the little fuckers, jeweler glasses, and it's like it's kind of satisfying, like just smash them. So that's my life.
I thought you were going to say a magnifying glass, and you were blasting them like we used to do when we were little,
burning them with the power of the sun, and then ruining his tomatoes.
That would be a great idea, but no.
Burn.
Well, that
They're
sounds
actually really
great.
beautiful if you look at them like with the extremely high-powered magnification. But then
it's science and death all in one
And
fell
I crushed
swoop.
them,
It's
yes.
cool.
So that's what I'm going to be doing when my son goes away to college.
I am
Something to look forward to.
I am their god, and I'm destroying them.
So, Tim, would you like to say hi to everybody in the chat?
Yes, I would, Allison. Thank you very much. Not with a Y, not Allison with a Y.
Right.
Sorry, y'all missed that conversation before the show. But let's do the welcome to this week's edition of the Wednesday Night Live Show. This is the ASMR version. No, you're kidding me. I am not going to ASMR you guys. There goes that music, John. And you said look for the speaker. There's no speaker on any of my tabs. You're lying. Anyway,
cheat,
let's say
please.
hi to everybody in the chat. Let's see. Hold on, let me scroll to the top because I got an itchy scroll finger tonight. Mallory Gates, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Always wonderful to see you. Pam Spraggins, the two girls right in the lead out of the gate. Boys, you got to catch up a little bit here. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go down the list. Addie Tooney, always wonderful to see you. Steve's Vapes is in the house once again. Hold on, I'm getting to one of my favorite names in the every week. Here we go. James R. James R is in the chat, and his icon is the best because it is an actual pirate. Love it. Anyway, Rog and James R. Those are our pirates. And who else we got? I know Michael Redfern and some of the other ones will trickle in, but we got 12 off in space. Speak up, chat, communicate with your neighbors.
Don't
All
be
right.
scared.
Back to you, Allison, with 2 L's.
All right. Speaking of boys running late, is Phillip not joining us this evening?
I've not heard from him.
I don't know. He said he's under the weather.
Oh,
Under the
okay.
weather.
Okay.
Under the
We'll cut
weather.
him some slack then.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm sure we want to get started with Eric. We know that you're limited on time today, and we don't want to take up too much of it because you're busy fighting for us, and we need you well rested for that.
Right.
So we just wanted to go over this amicus brief that was filed. I think it's amazing. I know AVM helped, get this done. We raised a lot of funds. So, really something we wanted to be a part of. And I want to kind of just explain it to us in layman's terms of what it means and what the potential outcome could be.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, thank you for everyone who contributed to that. It was a lot of work, and so we really appreciate all your support. So some of you have probably heard me talk about this before, but traditionally courts give agencies a ton of deference in court cases. And so that's kind of like whatever the agency says, we're going to go with that. It's a little more involved than that, but that's basically the problem. And so it's very difficult for folks like us, and in any industry for that matter, to challenge agency decisions because the scales are so weighted in favor of the agency even before you walk into court, because they kind of get the presumption and the deference in favor of them. And so for the last 40 years, there's been one form of deference called Chevron deference. And basically what that says is that when a court has in front of it a statute, a law, it's on the books, it's right in front of them, and they read it. And if it's absolutely clear what it's saying, Congress, has said, if X happens, you got to do Y, then the court will enforce that. But as you can probably guess, it's impossible for Congress to address all the issues and the permutations or whatever that can pop up under a statute. So the statute ends up being arguably ambiguous. And so what is a court to do? Unfortunately, we have this thing called the Chevron doctrine, which comes from a case that the Supreme Court handed down way back in 1984, Chevron v. NRDC. And what the court held was that if there's an ambiguity in the statute, the court must defer to whatever reasonable interpretation the agency gives to that statute. And so this has caused all types of problems. The first is that courts have over time just reflexively deferred to agencies. They don't do the hard work of asking, is there really an ambiguity? Can we figure out what Congress was saying? And so they just, whatever an agency says, sounds good to them. The second problem is that has allowed agencies to take increasingly aggressive interpretations of statutes to the point where their interpretations are far removed from any common sense interpretation of the statute. And so that makes it, doubly difficult to successfully challenge, agency decisions and agency actions that are based on, some type of interpretation of a statute. And so over the years, over the decades, people have grown increasingly concerned about it, especially conservative lawyers and judges, commentators, and obviously, American industry, because we're usually on the losing end of that. And so there's been a concerted effort to convince the Supreme Court to revisit that Chevron case, that decision. And so it's finally happened. So the Supreme Court has accepted a case called the Loper case. It involves fishing, or fisheries, nothing to do with our industry. But the issue in that case sets up perfectly this question: whether or not the Chevron doctrine should be limited in its application, or it should just be scrapped altogether. Right. And so the Supreme Court is going to hear that case. The briefs are being submitted now, but it will hear oral argument in the fall. This is a landmark case. It will be one of, if not the most important administrative law, and that sounds boring, but administrative law decision in the last half century. And it, depending on the outcome, it could significantly impact the ability of industry, manufacturers, whatever, to go into court and to challenge and have a fair chance at challenging agency action. That's why it's so important. It's so important that at about 3:00, I counted how many amicus briefs were filed yesterday, and the deadline was yesterday, to support the petitioners in that case, 45, wow, including 26 states and state attorney generals, the U.S. Congress, at least the Republican side of the U.S. Congress, and countless trade associations, et cetera. And so we're one of them. So what we did is pointed out to the court. You don't want to just go to the court and say, overrule it or limit it and just give legal thing. You got to give it an example. And so we reflected in our brief on the MDOs that have been issued for over 1 million of these non-tobacco flavored products. The plain language, and that's the key, that's where the Supreme Court is probably heading, and I'll explain it in a second. But the plain language of the Tobacco Control Act requires FDA to individually evaluate each application and bounce under the APPH standard, the appropriate for the protection of public health standard, all of the evidence that's in each application. Because you could have very similar products, but maybe one thing makes a difference. Maybe one product uses maybe a flavoring that does pose some health risk, and the other one doesn't, even though they're exactly the same. So one should get a marketing granted order, the other shouldn't. But you don't know that unless you evaluate each and every application. And that is what the statute says. And we all know that is not what FDA did. Nope. FDA interpreted the Tobacco Control Act as allowing it to issue cookie cutter MDOs without ever having opened up those applications except to see if that comparative efficacy test was conducted. That's it. They didn't do anything else. That goes directly against the plain language and one of the underlying purposes of the statute, which is to promote less harmful harm reduction products. And so they've essentially implemented a de facto ban on non-tobacco flavored products, despite the fact that the statute also says that if you want to do that, you got to go through notice and comment rulemaking. You have to do a rule to give us a chance to comment and build the administrative record. They've skipped all of it. They took a massive shortcut. The vast majority of federal circuit courts, those are the appeals courts right below the Supreme Court, have just skipped over all of this. They never asked, what does the statute say? They just assumed that this was okay because FDA said this is our reasoning. And they rubber stamped an approach that has no basis in the statute. And so we use that as just one example of many that have been presented to the court, showing that Chevron, even if it was well-intentioned and makes some sense, agencies are experts, we should defer to them. In reality and as a practical matter, it has not worked. And it has allowed agencies to basically run amok. And that is what's happened here in this industry. Yeah. So they will read that amicus brief and they will take it into consideration. And, it's kind of like just one vote to at least limit Chevron, if not scrap it altogether.
Second option.
So yeah, I'll let you follow up.
I'll go ahead. I will. I think this community needs to come to a realization that the likelihood of this industry is going to depend on lawyers. I'm going to throw out a few numbers here. 80% of the consumers out there have no idea what 90% of this stuff means. So on behalf of the Wednesday Night Live show, I want to thank you for being here and kind of helping everyone better understand what's going on. But my question to you, I know this is something that basically you guys shouldn't be doing, but do you think there should be some plans out there to help the vaping community, the AKA, the customers, more involved with legal proceedings in the future? And do you feel that is important moving forward with future cases?
Absolutely. And that's the only way that works, because a lot of, the vast majority of the people in this industry are small businesses, if not mom and pop shops, and they can't afford to litigate these cases, especially in front of courts like the DC Circuit and the Supreme Court. And so you have to come together and all chip in, time and money and insight so that we have the best chance to succeed. Because no one company, unless you're Juul or something, and you have those resources, is going to be able to fight these battles. And this is a perfect example of people contributing money, contributing their name to the brief, which also counts a lot, to make things happen. And so it's imperative that we work as a group and not independently. And just seeing these names on there, and we made, I think, at the point in another amicus brief we filed in the Avail case in the Supreme Court, these are all small businesses. And, courts will take notice of that. And Justice Gorsuch in particular has, expressed concerns about how much power administrative agencies have over individuals and small companies. And unfortunately, we've all lived that and seen that. Yeah. And so it's important to get your name out there and to let people know that you are being effective.
And I'll hit you with the simple one. I have to hit you with one of our loosen you up questions. But pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
What's that?
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
I say yes, and my youngest daughter would absolutely agree. She never gets pizza.
Yay!
I think my first pizza with pineapple was probably like in the late 80s, Domino's, when everyone was like, "What, pineapple?" And I was like, "This is good. This works."
Does work.
All right. So my question is: so if the amicus brief is taken into consideration and it does influence the decision on this case that they'll be hearing, which they said, I believe I read where it said we probably won't get an outcome until next year sometime. How does that reset the FDA and the whole process of the MGO MDO situation? So, I mean, if it was to turn a corner, does that mean that effectively everybody is put back on the board and then they have to reprove that it doesn't have a net health benefit to the public and that some of these MDOs could be converted to MGOs?
No, I think the ruling in this case is going to be much broader and it would be difficult to immediately say. We wouldn't be able to say because of this decision all of a sudden the MDOs are off the books. But we are all talking internally that if, depending on what the Supreme Court says here, and thinking about to go to your question, thinking about, is there any leverage, moving forward that we gain from this, whether it's vis-a-vis the old MDOs or any new decisions that that FDA is making. I mean, I just know because we're involved with the FDA on many issues that, they are, along with other agencies, are worried that, that huge advantage is going to be lost. And, that means they're going to have a much higher bar to justify many of their decisions.
Right. Okay.
Do you think some of these court cases that have been lost, could they kind of be revisited or refiled in a different way now if that did get changed? Because some of these, courts maybe sided with the FDA because of this, Chevron?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're thinking about. What can we do if they scrap Chevron? Is there a way to revisit these cases? Yes. It won't be easy, but we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Charles.
You got any questions, Charles?
Eric, just to bounce like a really naive question off of you, because I'm obviously not a lawyer. The obviously most logical way for a regulator to deal with this industry is to set safety standards for devices and liquids.
Right.
But this is how stupid I am. What I heard you say is that the law itself requires them to look at each individual product separately. Right. So this has nothing to do with what really should be happening.
Well, no, because they can work together. FDA should and could put together a notice and comment rulemaking with general standards and then review each application vis-a-vis those standards.
Okay.
So those work together, not the opposite. So
okay.
It's not what FDA shouldn't be doing is this cookie cutter, we think everything, it would be nice if they said all non-tobacco flavors are safe and good and APPH, but that's never going to happen. What they could do though is say, look, here is what a ideal device in e-liquid looks like. I'm just throwing this out, and here are the things that work. And if you come, if you look like this, you have a pathway to market authorization. But they would still have to independently, case by case, look at each application. Because that's what the statute says. But that doesn't mean they can't make this an efficient process. It doesn't mean they can't give us a clear indication of how to get market authorization. They can do that.
Do you think that FDA was just overwhelmed with 3 million applications and they said, fuck it. We're just going to take the easiest path we could possibly can?
Yes, that's the fatal flaw memorandum. They said we are overwhelmed. They said in so many words, we're overwhelmed. We have to do this as efficiently as possible. And they dreamed up the comparative efficacy test because they knew none of us had done it because they never told us we had to. And there's a difference, and this is what the courts are getting wrong. There's a difference between the statute absolutely says there is an element, you need to submit evidence on kind of comparative risk and I guess efficacy. But that's fundamentally different than requiring a very specific study that goes to comparing the cessation effects of your non-tobacco flavored products and your tobacco flavored products, assuming you even have any.
All right.
And that's what they missed. And it's because they have been conditioned over the last 40 years to simply assume what the agency is telling them generally is correct and going with that. That's the problem with Chevron.
As far as I can see it, the legislation itself, though, requires FDA to not see the forest for the trees. Right? So if you need me to explain that, we've got 17 million adult nicotine vapors in America right now, according to the CDC's National Health Interview Survey. And we know at least 80% of them are using flavors. So that's 13.6 million adults, legal adults. And so the FDA is, in terms of appropriate for the protection of public health, is not thinking to itself, well, what happens if we just prohibit 80% of the products that adult vapors are using to reduce or avoid deadly cigarettes? That's not even entering into the calculation.
And that's the point, we've tried to make in our briefs, and that this is not a one-sided issue. And that is what the Fatal Flaw Memorandum does. It's what the accompanying TPL, the technical project lead document, did, which was kind of their white paper, essentially, also cookie cutter. That when you talk about population as a whole, Congress meant population as a whole. And that means
not just teens.
Not just teens.
Yep.
And it means taking into fair account the impact that this de facto ban, they never talked about that. They acknowledge that this is a population level standard, but they never talk about the impact that this will have on those folks, those millions of folks you just talked about. And, the fact that the courts are missing this is just stunning to me. And so, if Chevron had been scrapped before the MDOs came out, it would have been much more difficult for them to take this position. In fact, they couldn't have.
Right.
Which is the point of our brief.
Right.
Well, I'm so glad we have you on our side.
Yeah, we are. For those of I've never seen what happens in court there with this issue. So can you kind of set the scene? Are there witnesses, or is this all just documented stuff that you guys turn into the Supreme Court and they just read through through your stuff, or is there actually people standing up and questioning a witness, or I don't know how that all works. So
right.
Yeah. So
the Supreme Court is not like a trial, like when you see it on TV or in the movie theater. So to the extent we even go to movie theaters anymore, it is 9 justices, and they will have read all of the briefs. So the briefs would contain, arguments and evidence.
Okay.
But there are no witnesses. There's no introduction of evidence. And you simply have the 9 justices sitting up there, and they will ask questions of the lawyers for the petitioners, the local petitioners, and then they will ask questions of the government represented by DOJ and the Solicitor General. That's it.
Wow.
Sometimes they will allow some other folks to get up and argue and answer questions. They most likely, sometimes a lawyer out there that is such an expert in an area, they'll ask him or her to answer questions. Maybe one of those lawyers was on an amicus brief, but it is basically just the lawyers for the fishermen and the lawyers for the government, and that's it. And they ask questions. You can sometimes read the tea leaves from the questions that are asked. A lot of times not.
Yeah.
And then they issue a decision, and that's it. So it's not a trial.
Okay. So yeah, I just was concerned to see some moms there from PAVE standing there.
No. No,
But
and
they got a
they'll
seat,
have-
they got a seat before, so I was kind of worried that
Yeah.
they would get another seat.
Yeah, they, I guess if they get one of the few seats in the gallery, which is very difficult to do,
Yeah.
no, they will not be standing up and saying anything.
Yeah, and they won't be holding up signs. They're not allowed to do that.
No, maybe outside.
Maybe outside, yeah.
So, Eric, I was literally going to ask you about the tea leaves. With this somewhat more conservative Supreme Court, within which, like 6 of the 9 are Catholic, it's a bizarre
Yes.
mixture of people. Can you read the tea leaves?
So a few things can happen. So we know that there are 3 justices who seem to want to scrap Chevron, and that would be Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas. Kavanaugh wrote a long law review article right before he was appointed, where he kind of just mused on Chevron, and it's a really good law review article. We cited to it in our brief, and it's you kind of get the sense that he's ready to scrap Chevron too, but he never committed to that. And there were parts of that article where he seemed to say, well, maybe it does have some type of role here. The 2 conservative judges who are question marks, well, I wouldn't say question marks, but maybe on the other side. So Justice Barrett, clerked for Scalia, who was a longtime fan of Chevron until the years leading up to his death. And so it's going to be interesting. And so he started to become critical of Chevron in that it gave too much power to the agencies. And so it will be interesting. And no one really seems to know where she's going to come down on this. Justice Roberts, who is going to attempt to kind of steer the court towards a consensus. He doesn't like overruling precedent, has expressed in the past in dissents. And now these dissents are old because Chevron hasn't been used by the Supreme Court in like a decade, which also sends them out. It tells us where they're heading. He has said Chevron does have a role because he thinks that if Chevron is completely scrapped, it actually puts too much power into the hands of the courts. So he would like to see perhaps Chevron limited in its application. So in other words, it would be very difficult. The Supreme Court would set up some rules and guidelines to make it very difficult to find that a statute is truly ambiguous. And the reason we know this, and he would be doing this to also get the liberal judges on board with one decision, because that's what he wants. That's his MO. And maybe it should be as the Chief Justice. And so what happened was a few years ago, we had a similar doctrine called the Auer doctrine, AUER. That was the case where it was kind of set forth, and it gets more complicated than that, but it's called the Auer doctrine. Same principle, but it was instead of where deferring to an agency's interpretation of a statute, it was deferring. You should always defer to an agency's interpretation of its own regulations. And so conservative folks have been trying to scrap Auer. So in Kaiser v. Wilkie, the Supreme Court took it up. They didn't scrap it, but they set some guidelines and some guardrails for ever getting to the point where you could say that a regulation is ambiguous and therefore we defer to the agency's interpretation. And he got, most of the court to agree to that. Now the court's a little different now, but you can see where he's heading, because the liberal judges aren't super, again, they haven't cited the Chevron for years. And so even the liberal wing, it may be is concerned that Chevron has gotten out of hand, and we need to at least limit it. And that's what our brief did. We made, and it wasn't rocket science, but we made some suggestions to the court that would have helped our industry and the courts deal with the MDOs more effectively. So we didn't say you necessarily have to scrap Chevron, although we said at a minimum you should set some rules. implying that, we're fine with it being scrapped. But I could see, especially if Barrett and Roberts aren't ready to scrap it, seeing something that limits Chevron's application. But at this point, anything would help.
So the main court case for the Supreme Court has to do with fishing.
Mhm.
And there are 42 amicus briefs. So let's all be clear that our area is a pretty niche area in that in that much bigger picture. Is the court itself looking at questioning or modifying the Chevron what would I say?
Doctrine, yeah.
Doctrine.
Yes.
As like a big fucking deal, or is it just one more court case for them?
This is a huge deal for the Supreme Court. There are certain issues in the world of administrative law, and I hate using that phrase because it makes it sound so boring. But there are various lines of cases that have governed administrative law since the 1930s, since the New Deal and Roosevelt and stuff. And those doctrines and those approaches have greatly, favored the government. And so there has been a concerted effort by, business interests, conservative judges and lawyers, et cetera, to rein that in. And so Chevron is just one of many. And so this is part of a much larger kind of battle that is going on between stakeholders in this country, and not just our industry, but just everywhere, whether it's environmental law and occupational health and safety, food, drug, devices, consumer goods, everything. And what is the relationship between Congress and the agencies and courts, et cetera, and trying to rebalance those elements so that it is, in our minds, a fair. The game has a level playing field. Right. And Chevron deference is just one of many of those issues that are being pushed towards the Supreme Court. And so, yes, this is a huge deal.
So a lot of powerful interests will worry that this could open a Pandora's box.
Yes, the folks who generally support aggressive regulation in this country are very worried right now.
You can say it, shitting bricks.
They're shitting bricks. Yes. Do you bleep that out? I don't.
No, there's no bleeping.
They haven't bleeped me yet.
This is an adult show. So
is this 5 second delayed?
No. The only buttons John has is like clapping emojis and Snoop Dogg and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the Timmy sound.
John has the clap. Yeah,
he does.
I did. Well, actually, you know what? I could use that one.
There you go.
Oh man, Tim, go ahead.
Well, no, I guess my greater question is: does the outcome of this particular case result in a surge in other litigation that actually does impact the vaping community or the vaping industry itself? I know that a lot of people have filed cases. There's several that have been out there. So I guess with other people that have cases on the books that are still open and being currently litigated, if the outcome is favorable, how we'd like to see it fall, does that mean that people kind of go back to the drawing board and the procedures change at that point for cases that are still open, not yet decided? Or does that offer an opportunity for judgments that were previously ruled on in other cases? Does that give lawyers an additional chance to come back to the table and maybe re-argue some of the things that have kind of been closed out?
Yeah, absolutely. If we have an open case and and statutory interpretation is implicated, absolutely, you file a letter with the court. It's called the Rule 28 letter in circuit court saying this just happened. We need to rebrief this. As far as court cases that are done, we are looking at, depending on what the court says, looking at whether or not there's an option to revisit those.
Yeah, it's kind of like buying something today and then getting online and seeing that it's $30 off tomorrow, and you're like, another one, I want another chance at that. Yeah, I can't get that price match now.
Yeah,
but it to me personally, it seems like it would be the right thing to do, and that would be open the door to have the arguments heard again with the different outcome now, because like in the current status, everyone was subject to that cookie cutter rubber stamp sort of decision, which was an MDO without really much explanation other than They just said, well, it didn't meet the standard. It's like, okay, well, what is the standard? Like, show me the numbers on paper, because you can't even argue it. So if the courts are pushed to lean to that tiebreaker, I'll call it a tiebreaker, right? So if they're sitting on the fence and they're not sure which way to lean, then they go right to the agency, and then it's whatever the agency's rule is that says, oh, okay, all right, well then fine, case closed, plaintiff wins, or not plaintiff, but you get my idea. So I'm just saying it would seem only fair that the previous statute leaves everyone ass out. It's like, well, come on now. Yes, I'm hoping and praying that any new cases that would come along would garner different results, and then maybe open the door to the things that we're, as a vaping community, striving for, and that is flavors on the market, devices on the market, all this other stuff, instead of like scared that we're going to lose it all because we're just going to blanket generically say, well, it's strawberry, too bad, it's bad, can't have it. Yeah.
Yep. And we're thinking those things through, and there are some options. Nothing quick, but there are options.
Okay.
I had to do that for the our British viewers. Not my king. All right, I have a quick question for you. If this were to be in favor of us, does this change anything state-wise as far as flavor bans or anything like of that sort that have already been kind of pushed through?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, because it goes what the court, if the court, here are the two ways it can work out. What courts did before Chevron was they did what, let's go back to high school government class. You remember the case Marbury versus Madison. And we cited to that. I cited to that case in our brief. And that case said it is the job of the courts, not the executive branch, to interpret a statutory language. And so what courts did before Chevron was exactly that. They would interpret the language. They would ask, how does, is there really an ambiguity? What's the, what's the overall goal of this statute? What's the context of this provision, et cetera? And that's not easy. That's hard work. It takes time. And that's the step that courts have been skipping. And so what would happen is we would see that again, and what courts would do would be kind of what Justice Kavanaugh wants to see. They would give the best interpretation. Now, of course, in reality, there may be, judges may disagree on what that is, but it does mean that you don't reflexively defer to any reasonable interpretation. It's got to be kind of the one that's most common sense, the one that makes most sense, the one that is the best, as he said.
Common sense.
The other and so really that is where this court is probably heading, in the details are still up in the air. And so courts have, as far as I know, have in every instance when a flavor ban has been litigated, they have read the preemption clause in the Tobacco Control Act, a certain way. And, whether or not courts would differ or maybe, change their interpretation if Chevron is scrapped, then, we'll see. Now, the preemption clause is a little different because you're not, it doesn't involve a federal agency saying this and et cetera. But the point about Chevron, and I think what we made in our brief, is it's more than just about what a federal agency says. It has, as I said, conditioned courts to just defer to, whoever the expert is in the case, the state government, the local government, the federal government. It's conditioned them to always lean that way. And if Chevron's gone, which is going to be one of many ways this conservative court sends signals to federal courts not to defer, to ask the hard questions, then maybe we have a chance to convince a court to spend more time looking at the plain language of the statute. And if you look at the cases that R.J. Reynolds lost, I mean, it's stunning that courts held that a flavor ban is not a tobacco product standard and therefore preempted. That's stunning. But it's because they have a public health and safety agency, whether it's the local government, the state government, or whoever, telling them this stuff is bad, don't preempt it. And so yes, Chevron getting scrapped or limited would be part of kind of an overall push to get courts back to their job, which is to ask, what does the plain language of the statute say? But in those cases, in the R.J. Reynolds case, the courts ignored the plain language.
Well, it would affect the FDA's way of regulating it, the e-cigarette products, if that were correct as well.
Yeah, so there are few, and I've said this, there are future battles on preemption depending on how FDA proceeds. And in fact, I would argue right now there are cases we could bring challenging flavor bans in addition to the grounds that R.J. Reynolds did. And so far, we haven't done it, but there are arguments based on what FDA has already done. So we're not done. There are more battles to be fought, and if Chevron is scrapped or limited, that will only help.
Owly.
I mean, I've been kind of wrapped up in this. Obviously, my job, eSig Charleston, is on there. I'm really happy. My boss has been saying from day one, the only way we beat the FDA is in court, and he is right. So hopefully he's not watching and he heard me just say he's right, but he is right. And, I know that, Brian King,
one of my favorite movies,
has been, he tends to say the right thing at the right time to people and kind of give false hope. And I think people hope that the FDA will eventually work with us, but I feel like all of the MDOs kind of speak for themselves. And if that was the case, why don't we have something in writing where we can then, turn and follow this and actually refile our PMTAs? I know a lot of small businesses are afraid to invest the money to do that again, because they're worried that they'll just waste the money and get another denial after all that hard work a second time. So I think that I'm very excited about this happening. I just hope that it's, that it happens soon, because, I feel like the FDA is getting more and more aggressive with their warning letters and their fines. And it's kind of scary, to think that, that you could be shut down at any time, because the FDA kind of is so hell-bent on not approving anything from anyone other than big tobacco.
Yeah. And it's, weird, odd thing, and I just spoke about this a couple weeks ago down in Miami, is that, and I know why it's happening, but it just shows how politics play into this, and people like Brian King and folks at FDA are, they have to answer to different people and all stakeholders, not just us.
Who, this guy?
Yeah. And they are now going after the 6 lawsuits that they filed last year, and then the CMP, the civil penalty actions that they're bringing right now, and there are more coming, we've been told, are all against small mom and pop shops, many in rural areas, who are not contributing an ounce, anything to the underage youth issue. All they do is make they sell some other products, but generally they just make custom made e-liquids for their adult customers. Kids are not using those, and they're putting these people out of business. And these people don't have money, they don't have any alternatives, nothing. And so the reason they're doing that is because it beefs up their numbers, because Congress is bringing them before Congress and saying, okay, what have you done? And they can say, well, we've brought this many enforcement actions and shut this many people down. But it's not doing anything to help the issues that this industry's been, and people on the other side have been debating.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot going on with Congress. They got a lot of shit on their plate. But how involved do you think they are with this issue? Is this to them, they're like, please, come on, guys, let's get this done and over with and move on?
Yeah, I mean, Greg Connolly can answer that question better than me. But, all it takes, my experience is, not only in this industry, but my firm we deal with agencies and in public health issues all the time, drugs, devices, whatever. Yeah. And all it takes is one loud voice in Congress to kind of muck things up. And we have more than one big voice in Congress, both on the Senate and the House side, who are coming after this industry. And it's exactly what you just said. There's too much to do for these people in Congress. And so if just a couple people focus on it, they can make a ton of noise. And unfortunately, the people who've been making noise recently are people who are against us. Yeah. And so, the answer may be, okay, well, we need our champions. And in the past, we've had a few, you can there were some questions regarding some of them but you need to have those champions, because no one else, they're too overwhelmed. Yeah. My first thing that I ever did in Washington, D.C. was kind of lobbying. And I was just struck with just how overwhelmed those staffs are and the members themselves. And there's just no way. I mean, it's taken me years to learn this industry and to understand all the factors and the pressures and everything. You
backdoor deals.
Yeah, when you're and deal with all that stuff. And so, that's why a couple people, one on the Senate side and one on the House side, can make it seem like everyone's against us. And then, of course, the press picks up on that, and they're like, well, everyone's against these people. And, the NGOs are very good at what they do. Yeah.
And I'm sure this is something the FDA doesn't want to look, but they don't want egg on their face. They don't want, so they're going to do what they need to do to make sure they have, I don't even know. I'm going to end up cussing. So I'm just going to say, they got their foot in the fight, and they don't want egg on their face. And I'm sure they're going to try to do what they can to make sure this doesn't go through. But and I'm sure Congress is, like you said, Congress has been pushing them in somewhat, and they haven't even really, from what I have read, they haven't really given Congress anything to back them up with what they have accomplished.
Right.
To riff on something that Steve's Vapes just said, we still have to keep in mind that this is one niche area in a much larger case with 42 amicus briefs. And if I read between the lines of what Steve said, a kind of agree that there are going to be some super powerful interests, especially on the environmental regulation side, that are going to be scared shitless about. You going to bleep me, John?
No, you know I don't do that on this show.
about like scrapping Chevron. And so anyway, I wish us luck on this. It's a big thing, but I think we all need to recognize and just be honest with ourselves about how many powerful forces are involved in this kind of decision.
Yep. And even if we do win, it's not going to change things overnight.
No.
And, but it will give us some leverage going forward.
Yeah, it's not a Hollywood movie which ends in 2 hours.
Right.
Happy
Where's
ending.
I want Aaron Brockovich.
Is that who you want playing? Who you want playing you, Charles?
Everyone says what's his name? Kevin Bacon should play me.
Yeah, I could see Andy Richter playing you, Charles.
Oh, nice. I was thinking Bradley Cooper. How about that?
Oh yeah. Okay. You went straight for Bradley Cooper.
The sad thing is about all of this is we wouldn't have to be doing any of this stuff if we could just be regulated fairly.
Apparently, that's it.
Well said.
Just like with any other product, it just, I've talked about it before on the show, and it's just, to me, it's just funny to hear our side, not just the consumers, but the people that are outside of our little community that aren't smokers, that aren't vapors, and it doesn't click to them what's taking place and how they're using flavors, everything that we enjoy every day. The reason we eat at this restaurant is because we enjoy the flavor of the food here, and to use that against us and have those people outside of our community say, well, wait a minute, if they can, like I've said it before, if they could do it to vaping, what's stopping them? Jokingly, I've said this before, where some congressman wakes up one morning and looks at his ATM bill from his son and go, holy shit, my kid's paying $400 a month at Starbucks. I'm going after Starbucks. I'm going to shut them down. No more mocha frappuccinos. No more, all that stuff gone. And what's to stop Congress and the FDA to saying the same thing with the energy drinks or sodas or candy or I won't say salt because I'll go if they try to ban salt, I'll lose my shit. So. But it just blows me away.
One of Clive Bates' best recent quotes was something about, to paraphrase, when somebody introduces a new artisanal beer, there's no regulator sitting and waiting and watching for that and asking if it's appropriate for the protection of public health.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, they're popping up like crazy here in Modesto. I got a new cider place and IPA place blown up. Tim, you got a question, Timmy?
Not really. I guess I could dream something up real quick.
Inspiration.
I give you your inspiration. Do you need music?
Yeah.
Do you need music?
Well, I guess this is an opinion question to Eric. So I think all of us here on the panel, on the viewing audience, and people that are more vested in the vaping industry. Of course, there's just people that are byproducts of wanting to get off of cigarettes and use these products, and they really don't even understand unless they live in a state where they're suffering a flavor ban or something like that, where all of a sudden they couldn't get the things that they want, or they found it harder to get the things that they want. But for the people who are vested, and we understand that this is not going to be a simple road to resolution. Obviously, we have to think in terms of it's going to get worse before it gets any better. And we have no timeline when we'll actually see light at the end of the tunnel. But if we project and we say there could potentially be light at the end of the tunnel, do you think that the government is just a massive regurgitation of policy and standard and statute, and that everybody that works hard in their lifetime to get themselves into a government seat or position or channel of power, can you see future generations playing a factor and maybe shifting the tide. So, for example, if we say, we got a bunch of these old lifetimers who've been in government for 35, 40 years, and they're just sort of stuck in their old ways. Can you see a future generation maybe shifting the tide of that and maybe looking at things a little bit more critically instead of just relying on agencies to push decisions or drive outcomes? So the next gen whatever's come into play, and they're like, well, vaping isn't so bad. I was a vapor. I don't vape now, but that could cause them to have a different view on how policy around vaping is handled.
Yeah, I think, and there are going to be a ton of factors, but I think one is that, every year that goes by and this isn't killing people is good for us. And no one ever talks about that. They lied about EVALI, and, no one seems to realize that.
Right.
No one is falling. People aren't dropping like flies, out in the streets because of this. In fact, they're living longer lives.
Yep.
Yeah. And so at some point, that is going to, I think, it's going to start to win the day, because then, the folks on the other side can't say, well, we don't know. Yeah. We need to do more research. Every day we're doing research, and every day people are not, healing over.
Right.
And so,
talk about the FDA having egg on their face, like not, ponying up for what Congress is demanding of them. Well, all the science is so overwhelming. Yeah. Is that where they want to be?
Yeah. And my sense on that point is that, slowly but surely the science and what FDA says it listens to is siding with us.
Yeah.
And, it's not that these are risk-free products, but the benefits so far outweigh the risks that you cannot get rid of these. And every day that goes by seems to, I think it seems like we're getting stronger, but obviously it's not going to happen overnight. But going back to your bigger question, this has nothing to do with my experience in this industry or being a lawyer, but for all the people who have kids on this call, I mean, kids are like college students and grads right now. They are completely different than me, especially. And the people on this phone are, I would call them entrepreneurs. So maybe it's not a surprise to people, but they have a different outlook on life. This generation that's in high school and college and in the early 20s. I think that, they don't want the government. It's not that they're conservative. It's just it's okay to experiment. It's okay to try new things. And the government shouldn't be sitting there, the nanny state or whatever, regulating every decision we make. And there are always been people who have said that. But to me, it seems like, kids, God, they just switch jobs. They don't worry about the next day. It's completely different than my generation. And I think that thinking and that approach, we will see when we're all old and retired, perhaps, playing out in policy and government decisions, and perhaps maybe we do see less regulation.
Yeah. Oh, they're a whole different group. I mean, it's some of the stuff that I see, some of this, like the Gen Z talk about, just, hey, their philosophy is you should change jobs every 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh man, my dad would have told me that.
No, my dad had the same job his entire life.
Yeah. I think the standard in work ethic is a lot different now. I mean, we just see that on an everyday basis, and me being involved in corporate America and seeing how hard it is to just hire people or retain people is a little eye-opening. Yep. But I mean, that would be my hope, because really this extends beyond me or anybody else that's on this panel right now, is that we're not in this vaping industry just for ourselves, just because we want to feel proud about the fact that we quit smoking using vaping. Yes, that is something we can put on our mantle and feel proud about, and it's led us to be part of a bigger community of people who are pursuing the same thing. But we're also thinking about those that we can help on the perimeter and those down the road, because we certainly have a dog in the fight. We want to see people have the same success that we do. And we talk about it on the show from time to time, is that, even with these staunch, stuffy suits and ties that sit, with a nameplate on, in front of a microphone that apparently speak for the American people, I find that a little hypocritical at best. But when we look at everything in general, it's like we want it to continue forward. We want it to keep going because we want future people who maybe got mixed up in cigarettes or took up smoking because it was an influence in their life or their family or stress, all these other things. It's just unfortunate to see bad information passed along, people conditioned to think that vaping is worse than smoking. So, we think about the future too, because even if we have to go through the struggle right now, we want to see other people benefit from our fight later on. So, that's why I think about the youth at this time. I mean, some of us might be perturbed by them. Just in my everyday life.
Stop calling the cops, Tim.
I'm gonna, I'm
get off my lawn.
Exactly. Get off my. You can just call me Chad.
Chad.
Yeah, Chad. But that's the whole point, and that's what I'm saying is that life is going to move on, and if cigarettes are never impeded or challenged or made harder to get or regulated differently, that means that more kids are going to get their hands on those, and that generation will continue. So we want this to persist beyond that. So that's why I asked the question about could a potential new generation create a shift in government, and that they might look at our one little piece of the pie differently. So it's not a question.
To a great extent, that's what happened with cannabis, right?
Yeah.
All of us of our generation grew up occasionally, whatever, and we realized
tipping our toes in the water.
We're fine.
Yeah. Despite the egg in the frying pan, scary commercials.
Yeah.
Hey, Nancy Reagan.
And the vape snakes in our brain and all that other stuff.
We've talked about it before on the show that about the staffers. A majority of these people in Congress and in Senate, a lot of these staffers are vaping. And I'm hoping they're not that naive not to see that they're actually vaping and not smoking. But, I would hope that these guys would say, hey, what's this, go up to a staffer. What is this doing for you? Is this benefiting you in any way?
In the 1920s and during Prohibition, whiskey was delivered directly to the Senate office buildings.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Good old Kennedys.
Okay. So that
right? Like Ken Burns' documentary on Prohibition is a must watch.
Okay.
But also to Eric's point, we're also going to see data begin to accumulate. So I've been looking at lung cancer rates, and we know that U.S. adult smoking rates began to drop faster than historical trends starting in 2010. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And exactly 5 years later, you start to see lung cancer rates start to drop faster than historical trends, which is actually exactly the lag time that you would expect to see for lung cancer. And this is lung cancer death. Yep. And death is bad, just to remind everybody.
Depends on how much in debt you are.
And so the evidence is going to keep accumulating. And so like, the number of vapors is increasing among adults, and the number of deaths is dropping. And eventually people and some journalists are going to start scratching their heads.
Yeah. And I don't know why they aren't asking those questions right now.
No, it's barely happening.
Yeah, exactly.
It's barely happening yet.
Exactly. Show us
I've
one
always
death.
said,
think of the teens. Think of the children.
Yeah,
I've always, like in 30 years, when you walk into a public health, university, a public health school, is this going to be the, exhibit A on how not to handle a public health issue?
Health historians are going to have a
field day. Yeah,
like
it is.
They're going to be dissertations written, books written, but that's 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we say it all the time. Show us a death. Show us one freaking death from vaping. One. Yeah. And we always get, it's about the children. It's about the children.
Yep.
Not the children.
Yeah,
Well, show me
trying to
one
stop a
death
future
that a child has
generation.
come by from vaping. Show me-
Eric, do you know that there's a $9,300 cash reward for for confirmed evidence of one
Oh, really?
single death ever caused by inhaling nicotine vapor?
I did
And how
not
long
know
has it
that.
been out there?
Yep.
That thing
Oh,
has been
it's been out
drawing
there
a lot
for-
of interest lately too.
It's been out there for a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Right.
If they invested it $9,000 somewhere, it's got to be up to at least 12 or 13 by now.
It's just entirely based on pledges. Nobody's put the money up. It's
Right.
people putting up, like, pledging. I'll spend $100. It's lots and lots of people saying, yeah, I'd put up $100 if you can find one case.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
we have no takers yet.
No takers.
Quick question on going back to the Supreme Court deal. Just wondering, is there any medical data that is being shared during this process? Are you able to use any of that data? I'm kind of wondering if from medical professionals that are out there, is that part of this process as well?
Yeah. So we didn't have a lot of space in our brief, but the first section of our brief does talk about, the health, or, the fact that these are helping people stop smoking. They pose much less risks than cigarettes. And so we have some extensive footnotes that cite to some of the well-known studies. And so, yes, that is before the court. And in our Avail one, so for those of you that don't know, Avail is one of our losses. When I say our, the industry's losses on the MDO. And so the lawyers representing them have appealed to the Supreme Court to get them to take the case. And the Supreme Court doesn't take, it only takes 1% of its cases. But we submitted an amicus brief that Clyde Bates worked on, and in much more detail talked about the current state of the research. And so presumably the same people that are reading that, at least some of the people will read, our Chevron brief will be reading the Avail brief as well. So somewhere in that building, there are several briefs that do talk about the science and kind of where it is right now.
Okay. I was always wondering if that was part of that whole thing. I know it's difficult. Well, you're representing companies, so companies actually by law can't say any beneficial factors to vaping, correct? So I was wondering if that was going to be, if that was allowed during this type of process.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fundamental difference. There's a difference between claiming your product,
right,
as it behaves as a drug and actually treats a condition like addiction. Right. And that is different than going before a court and saying, we have the APPH standard, which is not the drug device world. And that APPH standard requires FDA to consider all of the evidence that's out there, both sides. And the evidence, is showing, more and more that, and now FDA concedes that these products are helping people quit smoking at a better clip than the NRTs. So that's not, we're allowed to do that.
Yeah,
have to do it
I
because
see
it's
what
part
you're
of the
saying.
APPH standard.
Yeah.
Right.
Are you ready for a fun question?
Sure.
All right. Your first job, and did you quit or get fired?
Probably all of it.
All of it.
Actually, I had a lawn mowing business, so I had to quit because it turned out I was allergic to grass.
Oh, shit.
I would be lying if I said I didn't have any customers who looked out the window and were like, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah.
Is that our lawn guy dying on our lawn?
Yeah. So that was my first job.
Oh man, that had to suck finding that out.
Yeah.
Your first car was?
My first car, was a 1981 Volvo GT. So it had a racing stripe on it.
Ooh.
Orange and black racing stripe, and then the body was silver. It was stick and had Pirelli tires on it. And my dad figured out that, I should not at age 16 have a car like that. And so he sold that car to my best friend's dad and bought me a blue Cutlass Sierra.
Oh man,
Dad.
you literally had to open the door and put your feet out there to go faster.
Yes, and there were no bucket seats back then. You just had a couch in the front and back seat.
Yeah.
And so there was no tape deck, which just killed me. Oh my God. You just had to listen to what was on the radio station. You couldn't listen to your Miami Vice tape,
Yeah. Of course you had to have the stereo's the first thing to go. And every car.
It was horrible. It was horrible. It was blue, so it was a good color. But I had to share it with my sister, so that wasn't cool.
Yeah. That's funny. If you had an hour alone in the White House, what would you do by yourself?
I guess go to the Lincoln Room and see if you can see any ghosts.
Everybody goes right to the Lincoln Room. You notice that guy? It's like that's the most popular spot in the White House.
Yeah.
We've had go to the Lincoln Room and sleep in a bed naked. Oh, that's good. I won't put the pressure on you on this one, so you could say no if you don't want to do it. But the first song you remember learning all the words to as a teenager, and if you want to, you can sing a few bars of it.
It would probably be "Happy Trails" by Van Halen.
Oh, there you go.
Bum-ba-dee-da, bum-ba-dee-da. There you go.
Nice.
Happy trails to you
Yeah.
until we meet again.
What is it? Diver Down?
Yeah. It was Diver Down, and they actually had the 3-part harmonies. Old Michael Anthony and Eddie holding down the third and the fifth.
So I got to see them that last tour when David Lee Roth came back. So Michael Anthony wasn't, he was out of the band. So it was Wolfgang playing the bass.
Yeah.
But it was like, that's like top 5 bucket list for me. And so I got to see Eddie Van Halen before he passed away. And so that was great.
Those farewell tours are killing me because it's just like, I love them, but it's just like you get that moment where you're just sitting there and you just kind of close your eyes and you're like taking yourself back to like 1984. And then you open your eyes and realize it's 2022.
Yeah. Insane.
All right, I got a hypothetical for everybody.
There you go.
So since we're a tiny bit off track, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but it's a game that me and my friends and I would play with people, just these random questions. So So obviously there's a lot of bands that are, going through the retirement tours. This has nothing to do with that. So the question was we were looking at, like the absurdity of ticket prices today. And I think we were looking and somebody was like, oh, I want to go see Elton John. And then they sent us a screenshot. And I think the price of a ticket was like $4,000 or $5,000 or some stupid amount of money that half of us don't even have to even consider going to that show. So all things said, if a ticket was $5,000 and you could afford a ticket for $5,000, who would you go see? You would never question spending the $5,000, and it can be a band. It can be an old retired band that's that's non-existent anymore, or it could be somebody that is currently in play. So if you had the money to spend it on a $5,000 ticket, who would you go?
Can it be somebody who's dead?
Absolutely. So for example, if it was if you were dead set, man, I wish I could have seen Jimi Hendrix at least once in my lifetime, and that was a $5,000 ticket, I would spend the $5,000 to go see Jimi Hendrix. Similarly, Charles, it could be I want to go see Van Halen. I've never seen Van Halen. I did it Monsters of Rock and David Lee Roth was the singer back in that time. But it could be a different era of that band. So, for example, if you want to see Van Halen, but you never got to see the Sammy version, you would spend the $5,000 on the Sammy version, not the David Lee Roth. So it's pretty much an open palette. It can be anywhere and all over the board. John.
Oh, man, that's tough. I would have to say it would either be the Doors.
You can only pick one.
The Doors.
You can't have an either or. You got one shot at a $5,000 ticket. The Doors. Okay, very good. I've heard that one before. Allison.
I think I'd say Journey, but when Steve
Oh,
Perry
yeah.
was still
Steve Perry.
Yeah,
the lead
yeah.
singer.
There you go. Yeah, I wouldn't spend the $5,000 on
No.
on Arnell. I mean, he's
No.
great and all, but definitely
No.
Steve Perry.
Yeah.
Eric.
I would say the Doors, but Jim Morrison would have to be sober.
Exactly. Yeah, not hunched over a mic stand.
No,
just
yeah,
mumbling.
no, yeah.
Then you get Bob Dylan. That's
Yeah.
Bob
Dylan.
Charles.
To be a contrarian, BB King
BB King.
Definitely.
in
Good
a
choice.
very small bar.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice.
My son would love
on
that
a
answer.
crossroad.
Yeah, this was always
My
a
favorite
struggle.
song is "Nobody Loves Me But My Mother," and she could be jiving too.
That holds true to me right now.
Nobody. That's the whole song. He just repeats it over and over again.
Yeah.
Hey,
I
that's
love
good
it.
enough because I mean he's shredding on guitar anyway, because that's
Yeah.
pretty much why you're going to see BB King in the first place, right? This has always been a struggle for me. I mean, I've seen so many bands over the years, but I would probably say, and this is a band I never got to see in their natural form. I think it would, if I could go back, I would love to go back and see, for example, like Kiss back on the Kiss Alive tour, like back when they were like in their true heyday, makeup and just, the original 4 members with Peter, Chris, and Ace and all that, and we could just get rid of all the nonsense, arguing and bickering and then the scabs they've got going on right now. But I would want to be one of the souls in that picture of those 2 guys like holding up the Kiss banner on the sheet, that classic
Right.
picture of like at the Forum or wherever that was taken. And I think they actually found this too, but that would be mine. That would
See,
be
CCR
Confirms
was
that
my
the
second
entire
pick.
field of tobacco control involves time travel.
that's that's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
CCR was my second choice. Steve.
CCR,
would have been my second
Creedence
choice.
Clearwater.
I'm
All right, cool.
really shocked
You're
that
good.
nobody said the Beatles. I'm really shocked that nobody
Just was
said
not
the
into
Beatles.
them though.
Yeah, I
Just
know.
never connected with me. I was beyond that era. Like I didn't even connect with like Zeppelin and the Who and the Stones and all that, because I was just on the other side of that. That was classic rock for me on the radio.
Yeah.
And I was more like AC/DC, Judas Priest. I was more
You were the problem
on the edge of
child.
Sabbath and stuff like that.
You were the problem child.
I have a question for Eric.
Yeah.
Eric, do you like lawyer jokes?
Oh, I had a
No, of
bunch of them.
course
I'm not allowed
not.
to use them.
I mean, like it's really surprising when you ask lawyers that question. Some love them,
Yeah.
or at least say they do, and some hate them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of lawyers either until you need one. So
Yeah.
Do you think it matters what type of law they're into when they ask that question? Where, like, if they were a corporate lawyer, they would be more prone to laughing at one of those jokes, and if you were, say, a family lawyer or divorce lawyer, you probably wouldn't be. Do you think it matters when what type of
yeah, I mean,
law
if you're a
in?
regulatory lawyer, I mean, who hates us? I mean, what?
I don't. I love you. Actually,
Yes.
I love
Yeah,
you.
Yes.
I could kiss you right
Yeah.
now. Big wet kiss.
Yeah, so regulatory lawyers would probably laugh. Obviously, ambulance, plaintiffs lawyers, maybe not so much.
I've been binge watching Suits, and I just finished it, and that was a good show. I liked it.
Have you guys
It's
watched
also-
Jury Duty?
No,
I heard about it.
that's
Someone
next.
talked
That's
about
next.
it, and I still
Yes.
haven't watched it yet.
It's
It's
good.
good. It is.
So I've
I
been
gotta
binge watching Suits though.
Yeah, Suits was really good. I
Speaking of
didn't even
lawyers.
know that show existed until it came up on Netflix. I was like, oh, hey.
God, and there's so many seasons.
I finished it. It was good. It was actually really good. And that's all that's all corporate stuff. So it's a little
Yeah.
different than you normal. They threw some pro bono cases in that show, but it was still pretty much basic. And it made me realize how crooked corporate lawyers are.
Yeah.
And how shady they are, man.
Well, I don't understand. And LA law was the same way. It's just like, how
Yeah.
do these people have so much time to backstab and scheme? I mean, I barely have time to get my work done.
Yeah. And go to
not
and
to
go to
mention the
confession on
affairs.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
affairs that they're having.
Yeah, all the affairs and the line and
That's the show you don't. If you're married, you don't let your wife watch.
yeah,
If you're a lawyer.
exactly.
So I have a National Institutes of Health joke
Okay.
that involves lawyers, and this is where I needed to know if you like lawyer jokes or you don't, but you don't. So I'm not going to tell it.
No, go ahead. We have issues with the National Institutes of Health, so
Yeah.
Okay, so the National Institutes of Health, I'm sure you've heard this in the news, has decided to stop using rats in their experiments and to use lawyers instead. And there are three reasons. Reason number one is that there are more of them.
Yeah.
Reason number two is that the researchers don't get as attached. And reason number three is that there are some things that rats just won't do.
Just rats won't do.
that's a good one.
Oh man, that's good.
Sorry, I apologize,
Yeah.
but it is kind of funny.
Yeah.
It is funny.
I'm
John
glad
used to
you
talk
answered
to
some of our funny questions. I wasn't too sure if I could hit you with her. Because usually I have a couple questions that we always ask to lighten up the guests. Because a lot of our guests, it's the first time doing a live show and they're a little nervous. So I usually start them off with the pineapple and pizza question,
Yeah.
and then their first job and did they quit or get fired? Kind of loosens them up. So I'm glad that you had some fun with those questions.
Yeah,
you got one more there.
Those were really good questions. So.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to ask him if you were arrested with no explanation, what would your family and friends assume you had
There you
done?
go.
I once got suspended from high school for mooning, so
Yeah.
that's probably
Suspended for mooning.
Oh yeah, that was bad.
That's like softball stuff today. I don't know.
It is.
Today that gets you put in jail.
Or you get your registered sex offender.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
true.
you're
Yeah,
right.
you got to
You
be a
get
little
regis-
careful
yeah,
what you
you got-
expose.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't expose either. I don't have a butt to expose anyway. So it's a non-issue. I lost it 10 years ago, and I'm still looking for it. So
I'm still looking for mine too. Now.
yeah, I know. It's like it just went from it went to board, just
Yeah.
just flat.
Flat.
So
if God hadn't invented a belt, my pants wouldn't stay up. How's that?
I wear stretch pants and they start to fall off. There's something severely wrong there. So
There's one more here. Hold on. I got one last one on there. This will be the last one. What was your favorite toy growing up? Remember your favorite toy, Eric?
Well, this is how. So I spent years lobbying my parents to get an Atari.
An Atari 2600.
So I finally got it, and I had Missile Command. I had that, Pac-Man, which was just kind of, it was Pac-Man, but not what you saw at Pinball Pete's.
Yeah.
And
The tanks.
So yes, absolutely, Atari was my favorite toy.
Yeah, that's
a great game.
It was.
Yeah, we wanted an Atari, and my dad went and got a Radio Shack TSR 80 computer. And I was like, I don't want the freaking computer. No, you can program your learn code. Give us this big, thick book.
Yeah, we had
code.
the same thing.
I was like, what am I going to write code for?
Yeah, I spent like 2.5 days up there writing lines, like 10 go to line 20 for 3 days. And then all I ever made was like a smiley face that would go, I can't believe I completely killed my brain over that one. So I was like, I'll never do that one.
2-page thing just for that. Yeah, the color, the screen to change purple and the happy face to appear. That was 2 days worth of code.
I know there's a bunch of people out there.
When I was in high school, I was in Midland, Michigan, and
I'm from Michigan. I grew up in East Lansing.
I grew up in Midland.
There you go.
Which is, by the way, in the middle.
Yes. I was right here.
Excellent.
It must be a Michigan thing, guys.
And Dow Chemical is there, and they had donated their, they had fobbed off their big computer to the high school. So I took the computer programming course, and we had punch cards.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And I thank God that I saw that technology, because it was so amazing
Yeah.
that a stack of punch cards would go through the reader like this.
Yep. Like a money counter.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And but if you got one card wrong, like the whole program would be screwed
Yeah.
up. And
I
End
hate
of
to bring
line.
it up, the hanging Chad.
so hang on. So my family nickname is Chad. So fuck you all.
The hanging Chad.
Yeah, no, I took my first computer course in high school. It was Mr. Buttermore is the guy's name. That's who taught the class. I mean, and if you just have a picture of what Mr. Buttermore looks like in your head, that's what he looks like. And he had one of these big clunky old IBM machines that was the cards, and like literally we sat at our desks, and you know when you used to take you had the little card, you had to like take the number 2 pencil and like blacken the circle, you know what I mean, just so that you could get the readout. And we threw in like a stack of cards like that to like print out a banner or something that said like, you know, have a good day or something silly like that. But I learned the exact same thing. But to the Atari point, same thing. I lobbied. My brother and I lobbied for months to get the Atari. And we were so horrible. And my parents actually broke down and got it for us. Bless their hearts. They launched us right into nerddom. You know what I mean? We had all that stuff. And I remember my brother and I going down, and like, I don't know why this present was wrapped early for whatever. It should have just been a Santa gift. You know what I mean? Like the next morning, but we saw it under the tree. And of course, you know, as kids, you start trying to like assess. We're like, oh my God. So we sat there and like painstakingly tried to like peel the Scotch tape like off the seams just so we could peek inside the box. And my parents busted us for like, not caught us in red-handed, but they clearly knew that we were going to be up to nonsense, and they saw that we had peeled back the tape, I guess because my dad's so OCD about wrapping gifts that he could tell that his tape was like, you know, a millimeter out.
I remember my dad losing his shit when my brother spent $5,000 on a computer when they first came out. My dad was like, what?
Yeah. So
what is this going to do for you?
So back to the vaping thing. So this is an opinion question, and people can comment on however they see it. So we talked about not having one death on the books, and that data is going to build over time. Does anyone here feel like, cigarettes aside and lobby money and big tobacco and MSAs and all those other factors that we can say that's why they want to keep smoking on the market and eradicate vaping because it's eating into big tobacco's profits? But does anybody feel like government is in a mad rush to take everything off the market so they don't have to face the music regarding the data? So if they were to say, we're just going to eventually just get it to the point where it's banned, do you feel like they're trying to rush to a finish line to get vaping off the market so they don't have to turn around and say, well, God, now here we are 40, 50 years later and nobody's died from vaping?
Yeah, I've never heard that theory, but because, you know, we can always file, people can always file PMTAs. So
yeah,
it's not gonna disappear as long as people, you know, have money to invest in time. I think that and these products are on the market now. I mean, FDA has conceded that these products help people smoke or quit smoking, and those products aren't going to disappear. So, you know, things change, and it's like, you know, Charles said, you know, think about, I mean, marijuana. You know, you couldn't. There's no way. I didn't even see it in high school, and now half the kids are stoned every day on my street. And, you know, things change. So I don't know. That would be a pretty big bet on FDA's part to think that they're going to walk away from this before, you know, people just give up on vaping.
It was funny. I just read an article the other day about people in New York complaining that New York now smells like marijuana. You cannot go
Yeah.
anywhere and not smell marijuana. Now they're getting upset by the smell. I was like, well, hey, you guys, you
Yep.
did this to yourselves. You opened it up.
Well, I guess that covers up the smell of some of the other stuff that goes on in the
Yeah, I
New
guess
York
it's
streets.
masking the trash and the dead animals and the feces and all the other
urination
stuff.
and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, but
New York never smelled
there's
better.
Tim, there's no question that people in the tobacco control field,
Yeah.
the people who've spent the past 30 years of their lives battling big tobacco, they think it's feasible to end the entire tobacco industry and to end all nicotine use. That is, that's actually what some of them are proposing as the end goal. And so I think it's completely unfeasible.
Yeah.
Well,
I think we're living in a fantasy world, but it's
Yeah.
Well, how many decades have to pass us by before they actually start looking at the reality that vaping is significantly safer, even though we know they know that.
Yeah, they know it.
They know it, but they want to say that we don't know because we don't have enough research. Is it 40 years? Is it 50 years? So they have to compare it to cigarettes. I think was it like cigarettes? It was wasn't until 50 years later that they started realizing that there was correlation between cancer and cigarettes and stuff like that. How many decades have to pass us by before they actually acknowledge
this is the weird thing, because if you read between the lines, the dialogue coming from the ants, anti-nicotine and tobacco zealots, has changed completely, in my opinion, from 5 years ago when I started on this crazy world of Twitter and social media. And I think most of them actually do acknowledge and they know in their heart of hearts, this is safer. It's nobody's, like, very few of them have taken the next step to think about the bioethical implications of that, or the healthcare ethics implications of that. Because if it's safer, then, and I'm saying this for Eric's benefit, then not promoting it for adult smokers, half of whom will die, right?
Yep.
Is basically negligent homicide.
Right.
And discouraging adult smokers from switching to a safer alternative is, I mean, it's not sort of like mass murder. It is literally mass murder. This is like Pol Pot, Stalin, and Hitler combined, given the number of people involved. And what do you think, Eric?
Well, since I have to stand up in court, I won't. I won't use that analogy.
You can use me as a witness.
Yeah. I can't control them, Your Honor. I object. But I think if you could bring it back to bioethics and how can we tell individuals, the standard is a population standard, and we're stuck with it now. But how can we look individuals in the eyes and tell them that they can't use this, or they have to do whatever they need to do to access the black market? And those are serious questions that just don't seem to be asked, because we've been overwhelmed with the APPH standard. And the other side, those stakeholders have made sure that is where the debate happens. And, in our briefs, I mean, early on, we've submitted, declarations from folks who quit smoking and try to put an individual personal take on this. And it just hasn't worked, because the APPH standard has drowned everything else out. And maybe we need to do a better job arguing that individual. My screen went on. There we go. That the individual is part of that population standard calculus. So But absolutely, it's just, a court's going to say, well, that's a policy decision, or that's a policy issue. I don't need to deal with it. But you kind of do, because, the Tobacco Control Act says that one of its purposes is to promote lesser risk products, as long as they're, regulated appropriately. And, a ban doesn't seem to fit in that construct. So the judges should be thinking about this, and should be thinking about the implications of telling individuals who are facing, dying 10 years earlier than they should, that they cannot use this product when that product is absolutely, poses significantly less risk than the alternative. So
Right.
I totally agree with that. And we've tried to do that messaging, and it doesn't seem to be sticking for some reason.
Yeah. Well, we got 20 minutes here. Do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about Juul submitting the PMTA for the 2G? I love that, the 2G Juul device. What I don't get about this whole thing, I thought everything had to be turned in at a certain point in time.
No.
Now, how
So
do they
you
get
can still file PMTA, but you can't put it on the market until you have a marketing grant order. So you can't
Okay.
actually sell it. But this is
So
a
this
product
could be
that's been on the
years
market.
then.
Yeah. But this is a product that's been on the market in the UK since 2021 now.
Okay, yeah,
And I
that's
think
right.
it's an 18 milligram and tobacco flavor is what they're filing for.
With Bluetooth.
Yeah, Bluetooth technology.
Which kids don't know how to use Bluetooth. They don't know how to
No one's
access
ever
the
cracked
World
the code
Wide
on any
Web.
of these things.
They don't
We'll
know how
never
to
figure that
hack
out.
systems.
Yeah. The problem is that, good for Juul. I hope they get an approval. It helps people quit smoking. That's great. But if you look at places like New York, where I'm from, I have friends and family, people I graduated from high school with. I'm 43 years old. The only thing they're allowed to buy is something that has an MGO. That's how the FDA or the New York kind of put their, flavor ban into effect. If you have an approval, then you can sell your products in New York. And they're going to the black market. They're messaging me, hey, can you send me some stuff?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey,
they're not,
Allie.
they don't want to use these products. They want a flavored product. So you're creating a dangerous situation by getting rid of everything that people actually want to use.
Now, I kind of skimmed through the article though. Are they trying to push for the maximum of 18 milligrams even in the US market?
Well, that's just the product that they're filing for.
They're filing for.
Right.
I was just wondering if that was going to be the highest that they were going to put in this new product here for us for purchase in the US.
I would assume that it's because of the cap in the UK.
In the UK,
it's already available
right,
there, so maybe they're just trying to see if it'll get through. But again, Juul had some great flavors that people really loved. It's kind of sad to see that they're not even attempting to try to get those through. They're just going to do a tobacco flavor.
So Juul is not doing very well in the UK because it is at that lower nicotine level.
But isn't it a 20? It's what 20 milligrams? Isn't that the cap there?
It's
in the UK.
So I'm thinking of normally 5% is the high end Juul. I mean, that's
not allowed in the UK. Yeah.
That's the way my brain works, and that's not allowed.
Yeah, since the new device will only be available in 18 milligram nicotine strength pods. Currently, the Juul pods are available in the US at 5%, which we know is 59 milligrams, and 3% at 36 milligrams.
It's all very stupid. So these arbitrary caps on nicotine just inevitably will cause the people who are using the devices to puff more often and deeper into their lungs.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they say here that the UK is they got a 32%. They're 32% of the market, so that's pretty good chunk of the UK market. If they're still doing it in the high 30s,
that's better than I thought. Yeah. I think it's also interesting to look at the most recent 2022 National Youth Tobacco Survey data. Almost no teens in America are using Juul now.
No.
It's almost zero.
It's not cool.
So whatever sales they still have in the United States, it's all to adults.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even that, teen use number, that's the current use, which is a
if you looked at it once in 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. It's an artificially inflated number.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
why is it?
said, it looks like they've changed a few things with the newer one. I guess it has a different type of airflow where you're actually getting more vapor at the lower milligrams to counter the difference between not having the 5% and you're intaking more vapor, so you're actually getting more of the 18 milligrams than you were.
What does Eric think about all this?
This is way over my head.
No, I that's why. Yeah, I figured if you weren't all into what was taking place with Juul.
It does bring up.
It does.
What are the chances
it is relevant. I mean, you mentioned NYTS. I mean, we've cited to the most recent statistics a number of times now in lawsuits, and certainly have built off that to show that this is back in 2016 we told a federal court this is experimental for most of these kids. This will be replaced, and it's going to go. You're not going to see what you're seeing. With Juul, et cetera. And that's exactly what's happened. We're not quite there yet. I mean, this industry has a lot, we can do more, and absolutely we need to make sure kids aren't using these products. But, the NYTS and just seeing how Juul is now shifting away from that, and kids, they change their on a dime what they want to do. And my kids, 4 years ago were telling me, a lot of kids, seem to vape, and now they're saying no one vapes. They all smoke dope.
Smoke dope.
Yeah.
My son says that all his friends that do vape, they vape THC. They don't vape.
Yeah.
Right.
They said, well, Dad, everyone's smoking now. And I'm like, what? People are going back to smoking? And they're like, they use the word smoking to refer to smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
Son of JJ.
Yeah. And so my kids are seeing it, and it just in the statistics are playing, it plays out. And it's what Clive has been saying, and all these other public health experts, that this is not forever. Kids are going to move on to something else, and it seems like they are.
Yeah, that's what my son said. He goes, "It doesn't smell good like yours," and I'm like,
"Yeah, no shit."
Yeah,
mango.
Well, that's kind of some of the experience that I've been having. Now, they have been going hand in hand, right? So, like, let's just take the kids down at the pool, for example. Their prime objective was to use the pool as a building of cover so that they could go lock themselves in the bathroom and smoke blunts and do all that other stuff. Now, I don't know if they're coming back from the CBD shop with hemp flower. I don't know what they particularly have. I can tell you what it smelled like when I found it all over the counter down there. But I also see the same group vaping at the same time. But that just surprises me that they choose to go that route and not go the edible route to be clandestine, right? Because
they'd be sneaky.
What they did down at the pool was plain as day. I mean, I've been around the block a few hundred times. I could clearly, tell instantaneously what was going on. They didn't try to cover it in any other way. So, but that's
they saw you as the cool uncle, Shane.
Oh, they don't even really know they don't really know who I am. Like, that's the good part about it. But so it just is interesting to me. And like Eric was saying, is that they change on a dime. So this is kind of a double thing. This one's a vaping related one. The other one goes a different direction. But the other one is, so to Charles's point about the kids just don't use Juul anymore because it's not cool. Do you think that plays favor to the general argument on the ant side that, the kids aren't using the Juul because now it's pretty much only just tobacco? And as you can see, the kids are attracted to flavors. So that's why they got the elf bars and all the other stuff. That's what attracts them. Do you think that plays favor to their argument? And then on the same token, to Eric, do you think that the hemp industry, which right now it's pretty much Wild West because of the Farm Bill, right? That's how kind of everybody's getting their hands on everything nowadays. Do you think that there will be a resurgence in litigation around, or an increased attack on the hemp industry because of the attractants like the gummy bears and the little candy looking things that they kind of like to peddle as their argument around vaping. You know, it's candy and it's attractive. I'm like, well, vaping doesn't come in a Rice Krispie treat.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
it doesn't.
yeah, the FDA has already issued warning letters to companies that have candy lookalikes and stuff like that because the kids can't tell the difference.
Yeah. They can't read.
Nope.
Welcome.
Yeah, I've been wondering. It's the process. So you think back to 2015 and 2016 when Azim and I litigated our first case. It was the Indiana case. I don't know if you remember it, but Indiana was trying. It was a weird situation, but this was before kids had really started using these products. And so the other side, we were going against the state of Indiana, but, the NGOs were lurking and they were trying to make arguments that, this is bad for adults. We don't know how safe this is. And they were really struggling. And it wasn't until, we had this, huge jump in underage use, did they start to get traction. And so I'm sitting here watching the THC and hemp industry or what have you, wondering when, what's going to be the Juul event for that industry.
Right.
Where it's kind of a crisis. You learn in government class and college that, Congress and state legislatures won't do anything until there's a crisis.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of happening here in California with the black market in the hemp industry. And that's the problem that they're having here, that there's actually more running around in the street than there is in the actual shops anymore because people are just fed up with paying that initial tax on that product or that not even the tax, just the amount of money that they're having to spend for what they can get on the street.
Yeah. I mean, Avali was, I guess, maybe a mini crisis that, people won't admit had nothing to do with us and had to do with, black market THC products.
Right.
But I guess it wasn't big enough to result in something like the Tobacco Control Act. So, but someday you got to think someday that industry will face something like Juul, and it'll be interesting to see how the politicians react. But no one had to backtrack on vape because vape didn't exist really, and so the crisis comes only a couple of years into these products becoming popular and commercialized, and so no politicians had to backtrack. But with marijuana, they're going to have to backtrack.
Yeah,
Mm.
and that's really difficult for people to do.
Yeah. And also the same, people in government that are against vaping seem to be pro marijuana.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the tax money or, the vape or the marijuana industry just, over time just wore people down and did a good job of, promoting their industry. I don't know what it is, but it. So,
I'll share that article right there for everybody in chat if you want to go and read that one article.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe it's starting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I got to imagine.
I like the title though. That just cracks me up.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
because people now are claiming that teens are vaping fentanyl through e-cigarettes.
Yeah.
And so on. It's all very Orwellian. But the thing is, the backtrack issue that Eric raises, I think it's super interesting because we're moving in the direction of legalizing cannabis. There's no question about that. Yeah. And to my mind, because I've talked to a lot of people in the drug harm reduction space, that the thing that tilted that needle was a lot of older people, as old as me.
Whoa, that's old.
Yeah, seriously. Talking, saying, look, cannabis, this helped me recover from my chemotherapy, and this helped me recover from, this. It was old people saying this helped improve my health. I think that finally tilted the needle. I really think that we need to look at the therapeutic benefits of nicotine to start to tilt the needle on our side of this coin.
Yeah.
And I just saw the comment below, I mean, there is a complete and utter confusion in the press, and vaping is vaping. They don't distinguish between vaping a nicotine product versus THC versus God knows what.
Right.
And we have, this industry has fallen victim to that. It hasn't been able to straighten that out. And that's why Avali was that made it possible, because all they had to say to an editorial board or a politician is, this is vaping.
It's vaping.
And that's all they had to say. And that was it.
The CDC still insists that people can vape THC in an e-cigarette.
There you go. That's what I say to them.
This just drives me bonkers. A cigarette delivers nicotine, so an e-cigarette is obviously a nicotine vape device. Yeah. And people who are vaping THC, I used to say, I don't know what the kids are calling it now, but generally they used to call those vape carts and vape pens and
weed vape.
Right? You don't call a joint a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly.
Joint.
No. Yeah.
So the language here is incredibly important.
Yeah, it is.
And right now, the antis are using the public confusion to their advantage.
Yep. My kids wouldn't know what a joint is.
Right. But if I was a kid and I got busted vaping and my parents wanted to know what it was, I sure as shit would say nicotine before I would say marijuana. So,
It's Nick. It's mango, Mom. Mango.
Yeah. Well, that's why I feel like that very low percentage left over in that CDC statement, of all the cases they looked at, these were all self-reports. And we made that argument even to here on Twitter, is that, kids are inclined to lie if they feel like they're going to get in trouble, their friends are going to get in trouble, there's going to be a whole whirlwind of shit coming for them admitting that they were smoking something that their parents would absolutely be furious if they found out they were doing.
Actually, so there's in the United States, there's a lot of research on that. So that approximately 30% of people who are using cannabis will not admit that they were using it, even if they're confronted with the positive urine test results.
Yeah.
And you have to think, why would they?
I was having a bad pee day.
Why would they not tell the truth? Well, the reason is the stigma, number one.
But you think the stigma applies to our generation, not so much the Gen Z and the millennials? Because I think the stigma's gone with them. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also fear of losing their health insurance, fear of losing their job, fear of losing, just fear of being fined if they're in a state where cannabis is still illegal. There are really substantial good reasons to lie about it.
Yeah.
And that explains the Avali, 15% who claimed that they were only vaping nicotine. It's totally predictable.
I'm willing to bet that Gen Z and millennials that do smoke pot, I'm willing to bet 99.9% of them don't know how to roll a joint.
Right. Yeah.
So I used to smoke drum tobacco when I was a smoker, and I got so good at rolling. It's a ritual. It's a skill.
Yep.
And I was really proud of that.
Yeah,
because all your friends were hitting you up because they didn't know how to do it.
Hey, roll this up for me.
So you're fun at parties, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you're the guy that didn't have to pay to get into the party.
Yeah,
so I could roll a joint.
Yeah, $2 for your beer cup. Nah, come on in. We got you set up in a corner over there in the back room. I got a line.
The last time I had cannabis was 5 years ago, and it was in what's it called, a blunt.
Yeah, that's just a cigar unrolled, and then you mix marijuana placed
you
back
shake
into
out.
It. Yep.
I don't know if Eric knows this. So you shake out the tobacco from an actual cigarette, and then you mix that with cannabis, and then you stuff it back into the cigarette.
Back into the cigarello.
So you're not getting a whole lot of cannabis.
Yeah.
No, that's why they can smoke 5 or 6 of them in a row.
It was very pleasant.
Yeah. Well, we're about that at that time.
We just laughed a lot. And
we're at that time. Eric, I want to say thank you for jumping in with us at the last minute. I really appreciate you coming on and trying to explain, exactly what's going on and what we need to look forward to, and hopefully all positive stuff. And what I'm going to do is let Tim and the rest of the guys and Allie say their goodbyes to you. Go ahead, Timmy.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, just want to thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts for standing up and fighting for a just cause. I mean, there's certainly the data and the science and our own personal journey support that. And, we need people in our corner who have the ability to fight the fight from a legal perspective. And so we completely appreciate everything that you do, and absolutely appreciate you coming on here and explaining it to us, because I'm blonde. What do you want? You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't get it. I need the expert to kind of lay it out in plain terms. So thank you very much. And I wish you much luck in the litigation, and hope that it all comes out in our favor in the end.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate last second you came through. I was kind of nervous. I'm like, we got to talk about this tonight. So I really do appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to the outcome and working with you guys moving forward, seeing what else we can do.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I've done a couple other podcasts, and I know I did not talk about pineapples and pizza.
I tell you, I have
and happy trails.
Yeah, I've been doing this long enough to know that first time people that are on the show for the first time, a lot of, not everybody is comfortable in front of a camera and answering questions. So I've always tried to have something in there to kind of loosen them up, and pineapple and pizza is a great way to start a show.
Yeah, plus we talk about really serious, depressing shit. So we gotta we gotta mix it up.
Gotta keep it lighthearted.
Gotta mix it up.
Eric, I mean,
Eric, you're a kind person, an extremely knowledgeable person. And I just, I have a great deal of admiration for you. So I just want to say that.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And Nazim and I are happy to help. This is something we're happy to do. So.
And we want all our viewers to stay on top of this and help in any way you can. I know, like we talked about when my question early at the beginning of the show, a lot of us, this is just kind of like, huh? So, a great way is just to stay on top of it, ask questions, and do your best to try to get involved any way possible, even if it's just, sending a few dollars or going out there and picketing. I know everybody does things a little different, and, everybody's got so much time to do what they can do, but and this is something that's very difficult to keep track of and understand. So do our best and try to stay on top of it and try to see what's going on and see what you can and can't do. Because there's things that these lawyers don't want you to do. And so, yeah. All right, guys, we will see. Thank you, everybody in chat. Thank you, chat, for throwing out questions and going through the show. And we will see everybody next week. And Allie, who do we have next week?
We have Jim, who works for Counterpoint Strategies. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that AVM's doing.
Okay.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Good
and
stuff.
Again, we'll see everybody next Wednesday. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Charles. And we'll see everybody next week. And let me find the right one to push this time, because last time I put Tim's song on. And
don't do that again.
Don't do that one. All right, here we go.